All right, I thought we'd start with something that most people wouldn't know about you and wouldn't expect on this, which is that you're passionate about cooking and woodworking, among other making. And, these are hobbies that require precision and scientific lens. So what appeals to you about cooking, woodworking, and other making?
So I know as a kid, I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were constantly tinkering and working with their hands. My dad and both of my grandfathers, like one grandfather was a appliance repairman and like an amateur inventor, and my dad and his dad were both in construction, and everyone was like making furniture, restoring furniture, working on their cars. Like my mom made and sold crafts her entire life, or most of her entire life, and so it just like making stuff was normal. I think it partially informed what I chose to do professionally. So like I make stuff as an engineer, like it's just, kind of ephemeral stuff. Like I make it with code and it runs on computers and it does complicated things. And the older that I've gotten and the more complex the things are that I build professionally, the more I seek out some way to actually do creative things with my hands individually.
Kevin, as the CTO of Microsoft, you have helped lay the foundation for Microsoft to be one of the most formidable companies on AI, sort of leading that charge. And so many people, including Sam Altman, said that you were the real architect behind the deal between Microsoft and OpenAI, which has sort of led to this tremendous breakthrough progress. So can you walk us through that decision? Like, why was that business relationship so important? I know many other relationships are critical too, but from the beginning, that was really what kicked some of it off. And walk us through that.
One of the things pretty early in my tenure as Microsoft CTO that was obvious was that the rate of progress in artificial intelligence was accelerating, and it was accelerating in this particular way where the entire discipline and the tools that people use to develop AI applications was becoming more and more like a platform where you were going to be able to make single investments in things and then reuse those investments just like you would in any other sort of platform to do a whole bunch of things. And so Microsoft is a platform company. You can't be a platform company in the modern era if AI is not part of your platform. And so it was just sort of obvious, like we have to be as advanced as humanly possible in all of this infrastructure for Microsoft to be competitive in the future. And so if you start with that premise, then the question is like, what are all of the things that you have to go do to build this platform in a very disciplined way? And like part of it is like you go build a whole bunch of compute infrastructure. So, the thing that we've been seeing is if you looked at all of the great milestone achievements in artificial intelligence, at the very least over the past 15 years, there was one commonality with every breakthrough thing, and it was that it used maybe an order of magnitude more compute than the previous breakthrough. Part of the decision was like, how do we go get focused on building this powerful infrastructure, the compute, the software that coordinates all of the compute, the networks, the data centers, the power infrastructure, like all of this sort of complicated system stuff. And then once you have the compute, you have to sort of decide how you're going to allocate the compute to someone building things on top of it where you're using it as effectively as possible. So like we started in 2018, like early, like thinking about how to go structure all of this in a way that made sense. And so, this partnership with OpenAI was like basically a bet saying, this particular team at the time also understood that this was a game of scaling compute and doing incredible things with it in a very disciplined way. They had a really good way of forecasting like what you could get from investing more compute. And I was like, if we work with them, like they will push us to build better infrastructure and we can enable them to do their best work. And so that was the central motivation behind that partnership. And it's also a recognition, I think that some things that you're trying to do, and this is usually the case with platforms, is you just can't do everything by yourself. Like you always have to have partners. Like it's nonsense to like think that you can go build a magnificent new world-changing platform all alone with zero partners. Crazy. Never works.
I mean, I love that recognition of the importance of partnership. I also think it's interesting, like you said, it was obvious to you because of the, sort of capabilities of compute, but that's sort of opposite of the venture model. It's like when you're a venture capitalist, you're like, great, I have this sum of money. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit all around the different startups and see what happens. And you were like, no. With compute, that is nonsense. And we need to be very deliberate about where we're going and ensuring that folks have enough compute to get it done. So, this seemed obvious. You were like, we need partners. We need to make sure to be world class. What was the most difficult thing or surprising thing about trying to get this done?
It was not a widely shared opinion. Like this thing that seemed pretty obvious to me did not seem all that obvious to a bunch of other folks. So it was obvious to me. It was obvious to Sam. It was obvious to like the founding team at OpenAI. And you could go talk about what the roadmap was, what the plan was, like what we thought was necessary to go build this very interesting thing. And not a ton of people were convinced. If you just sort of plot forward this crazy exponential curve, like you're talking about an incredible amount of investment. Like even the first increment of the investment we did in OpenAI, which is $1 billion, like seemed like an extraordinary amount of money to go invest at a nonprofit research institute that had no revenue and had never made a product before. But to me, I mean, it was sort of one of these funny things. And like, I guess in your career, you don't have too many opportunities where you see like a very big thing and get conviction on it, where even though you've got a bunch of folks like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. And like, it's like lots of people. So research scientists saying like, I don't believe this scientifically will work. Business people saying like, I don't think the economics of this are going to make sense. Like lots of folks, and still even today, like you just sort of see the critics of the whole approach. Like you can go on Twitter any day of the week and like have a gazillion people telling you that like, even though all of this stuff has been working so far, that like it broke yesterday and will never, never work again. So it's like, I'm going to use the word blessing, but I don't mean it in a spiritual way. But like, it's just this great stroke of fortune to like have, like insight and conviction at a point where, you even get the opportunity to go convince other people. So it's not like the opposition or the skepticism is a bad thing. It's actually like a fantastic thing. I mean, it tells you in a sense that you're doing something pretty big, because like it's changing in a fundamental way the way that people think about the laws of physics of technology and business. You have to get really, really sharp about like, why exactly am I doing this? It can't just be like, oh, this is my gut. Like some of it's your gut, but you have to be really, really, really principled in, so that you can bring other people along with you at this scale.
Yeah, and in part, I mean, the thing that is difficult about making these bets is that they're risk bets. And one of the things that I thought, you and Satya and a bunch of the other folks did very well is you said, look, we can make this bet Downside, $1 billion, it's expensive, but upside is a complete changing the game as to how software is built, how humans are aided, and it's a turn over the card, which if we're successful is going to get a lot more expensive and a lot more continuing the risk bet. In those early days, what was your wildest expectation, hope from that first christening of the taking this little tiny nonprofit that had been futzing with some research ideas and then turning it into a momentum, getting to, if I may use the word, some blitzscale?
I wasn't even thinking about like forging new frontiers. I was thinking about like, how do we go make sure that we can be as competitive as humanly possible in a handful of Microsoft's core businesses. So we have Azure, which is a hyperscale cloud provider that lots of people build applications on top of. And even in 2018, like, people were incorporating AI and machine learning into the applications that they were building. And so how do you go have things that are at least as good as all of the competition on our cloud so that people who want to build on top of Azure can build great things? And then, there's like all of our productivity software, like increasingly, and like this wasn't 5 years ago, like, this has been a, decades long journey that people have been on to uplift productivity applications with machine learning features and capabilities. And so this was like, can we push the boundary on that and like build more delightful things into our productivity offerings? So, I would have been delighted just to have that, to like have a handful of, APIs and a handful of features inside of Office that were moving metrics on those businesses. So, adoption and usage intensity on Azure and engagement and some of our productivity measures in Office. I did not expect things to go quite as fast as they went, and I'm still surprised at how fast things are going. So it's never been a question of like, will the AI systems be able to do a particular thing that surprised me? Like, I've had pretty strong conviction we get to the point where, like with GPT-4, like, you've got a system that can score a 5 on the AP biology exam. Like, that didn't seem like a stretchy thing for these systems to eventually be able to do. But them being able to do it when they did it, like, that was a surprise for me. And that's even with me watching the progress of the systems. So I've all of my surprise so far has been upside, like things just happening quicker than I thought they were going to happen.
No, I love that. And it's one of the places where we've seen most use out of AI, that like people are using it in their everyday jobs, of course, is Copilot. And folks who are using this every day, making their code better, having it be that assistant for them. And so, like, how is Microsoft working to make Copilot as accessible as possible? I know you guys removed the 300-person minimum for the businesses to adopt it. Like, how can we get this to everyone? Because one of the things I love, Kevin, about what you talk about a lot is that we need to get this into everyone's hands. This can't just be for the elite few. We want this dispersed to everyone. So how are you guys doing that?
Well, I think it starts with thinking about things as a platform. Like, one of the hard things about machine learning and AI in previous generations were that if you wanted to make a thing that had some AI capabilities, you had to have some people with PhDs, with a lot of expertise. You had to have like a bunch of data. You had to like really understand a whole bunch of very complicated state-of-the-art stuff that was tricky to implement, and then you had to go do a whole bunch of work. So like all of this like defines my first machine learning project. And the first machine learning project that I did, which is 20 years ago now, it took me reading a bunch of grad textbooks and a stack of papers and then coding for 6 months to like do a thing that a high school student can now do in 2 hours on a Saturday. And so part of like making all of this stuff accessible is like really building a platform. So where the platform's economics, like the cost of it is just going down, down, down. And like, that's not just like how much it costs to, call an API and like send a bunch of prompt tokens in and like getting a response. It is also about the cost of the expertise. Like, how much do you have to know as an individual or as an organization to go wrap your hands around this technology to go do the actual thing that you care about, which is like making whatever product it is that you're making, or doing whatever it is that you're trying to do creatively, or, whatever. Like the end goal is like always the important thing. Like the mechanism ought to just disappear into the background. And so like I think that's the important thing. So like the scale of the platform makes the unit economics better, and it naturally forces you, because you're trying to have as broad a customer base for the platform as possible. Like you have to make it simple. You have to make it easy to use. Like you don't want it to be like a specialized thing that only 40,000 people in the world will be able to like even understand. Like everybody has to be able to like jump in and use it in some way to make a thing. And then, like we're, from a product architecture perspective, like we're just sort of thinking about how it is that we can take the feedback from things that we're launching, and like we're trying to launch things relatively quickly, before they're perfect, so that we can get feedback on what users are finding useful, what they're not, what's clear and what's confusing, and so like that's just the classic journey that I think has been crystal clear since, at the very least, internet days, that you want your feedback loops to be as quick as humanly possible, so that your customers are telling you what they need directly and indirectly, and like you can listen to the exact things they're telling you and the data about their usage, and then you can just go make the thing better and better and better.
I think it's so like inherent and ingrained to Silicon Valley and to tech to do things like that. But I still think, because not all industries work that way, that people can be skeptical. People can be skeptical about putting things out when they're not perfect. And I think, again, like talking about that and hearing about it, and no, we're putting things out when they're not perfect to make them better, to serve the consumer, to serve the user is so critical. So I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, look, this is one of the things I learned from Reid a very long time ago. I think one of your favorite sayings is, if you're not a little bit embarrassed by the V1 of your product, like you've done something wrong. And like that's another way of saying that, perfect is the enemy of the good. And I do think it is one of the mistakes that AI labs were making up to this point. They were sort of assuming, like this is probably an overgeneralization, but like you had a bunch of folks who thought like, we're going to go solve all of the problems of these systems. And like once everything is sorted out and solved, like we're going to spring it on the world, and like everybody's going to love it because it will be perfect. And like, that's just not the way anything works. And it's honestly, people get irritated because you launch things that are like flawed, that need to be fixed. But like they would be even more irritated to like have this fully conceived thing, thrown at them where they had no ability whatsoever to provide any input in the development process. So if you want people to be part of your development process, like you have to release things before they're fully developed.
One of the things I think that people get zero, or most people just don't understand, and it's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast, is to understand that if you kind of try to lock in the now or the past, you may be doing critical harm to people in the future. So, for example, one of the things I most commonly say about this AI thing is people say, well, if I listen to, I just listened to Jon Stewart last night on The Daily Show, and it's like, this AI thing needs to be controlled. And the And you go, well, okay, is that the most important thing, or is getting a medical assistant to the billions of people who don't have access to a doctor the most important thing? Because if you get those billions of people access to a AI medical assistant, you may affect child mortality. You may affect, crippling health outcomes. You may affect all these things for people who, would make a huge difference in their life. And that's actually part of that future possibility, that the thing that we need to make real is actually, in fact, a very important thing. And it isn't just oh, look, there's this little percentage chance that you're going to do this thing that you're not going to be perfect at the very beginning. And it's like, well, yeah. And by the way, that's the only way we learn, the way we learn to be good to people and so forth. And people like to put rhetorically, well, who gets to make that decision? And the answer is, to some degree, collectively, the group of us do. Some of it's the government. Some of it's companies trying to be their best possible selves to their customers or employees or shareholders. Some of that's press holding us accountable. Some of that, it's these networks of human interdependency. It's not like, Sue or Fred, they get to make the decision, right? It's this set of things. And I think that's really key on this.
Well, it's also to me, the funniest thing in the world to think about all of these things, the media, the government, business, being these fundamentally different entities that are in opposition to one another in some way. All three of those things are accountable to the public at the end of the day. Business doesn't exist if their customers don't want to buy or use the things that they're making. Government doesn't exist if it doesn't have the mandate of the public, and the media doesn't exist if the public doesn't listen to them. And so we're all trying to serve the same people. And we've got a different point of view about what that service looks like. But it's just really important to remember that all of those institutions are trying to do the best they possibly can to serve the public in the particular way that they're serving it. And it's the public that's the constant across all three of those things.
One of the things that I actually found that was really illustrative is because of your background of growing up in a rural, poor town, was thinking about how these tools can help revitalize, even communities that are right now, being left behind in some important ways. And it's by providing them the right tools for empowerment. And AI could do that. Say a little bit about that in your book, for, reprogramming the American dream and so forth. Because I think that's a part of the humanism about what we're trying to do with AI that doesn't get enough commentary.
Yes. So, this is a mistake that I think product makers and analysts and public intellectuals often make, is they sort of look at their own experience and their own lives and what's hard and what's easy for me. And they make generalizations from that. I've just sort of seen, and you've seen as well, I know, in our product making experience in Silicon Valley, we are unusual relative to the billion plus people that you hope are going to use your products. We live in an unusual place. We have an unusual background, and all of us are unusual in that way. So you're just sort of trying to find the common thread across things, and it's. I'll give you this example from my family. We living in Silicon Valley or the Puget Sound area, New York City, or any of these urban innovation centers in the United States and across the world can sort of forget that the healthcare system is very unequal. So if something happens to me, I can I've got good health insurance and I'm in close proximity to like very good doctors, and I can go have, world's experts like look at things and like help me be healthier. And even in terms of preventative medicine, like I can go do a whole bunch of stuff proactively, because again, like I have proximity to like a whole bunch of like preventative healthcare options and good insurance and like networks of people who are all thinking proactively about their health. But, like that's not true everywhere. So my mom, who's 74 years old, still lives in rural central Virginia, and she has had this condition called Graves' disease for 26 years now, which is a thing that calls hyperthyroidism. And, the treatment for Graves' disease is like they irradiate your thyroid to make it less active, which then means you have to start taking thyroid hormone replacement medicine. And she's been on this medicine for 26 years at the same dosage. And your thyroid hormones like do things to your cardiovascular system. They can, affect your heartbeat and your blood pressure and like a whole bunch of other things. And her doctor, her general practitioner in rural Virginia, who was also like, older and trying to retire, was like screwing around with her dose of her medication to try to adjust her blood pressure. And like she had some like stress in her life because she takes care of my brother and she takes care of like my awesome 93-year-old grandmother who still lives by herself. Like she got into this spiral where she was in the hospital 6 times like in a handful of weeks with like these terrible cardiovascular symptoms that she was presenting. And the first 2 times she was in the ER, it was pretty clear they didn't even read her chart. Because if you had read her chart and looked at her symptoms, like the first thing you'd order was something called a TSH test, which would measure your active level of thyroid hormones. And like if you had ordered that test and gotten the results back, it would have been obvious what you go do to get her sorted out. And they didn't do that because like they're running an ER, like they're like crazy, constraint, like they're just trying to like, are you dying? Like, no, then like, just go away. Like we'll sort you out later. And it's not because they're ill-intentioned or dumb or anything else. It's just like that healthcare system is strained. And the reality is right now, what the tools are capable of, again, this is not science fiction. If you had taken her chart and taken her symptoms and just stuck it into GPT-4, like it would have told you to go order the TSH test. And then you could have taken the results of the TSH test and input it into GPT-4 and say, what should I do? And it would have told you what to do. And like, I'm not hypothesizing here about it curing cancer. Like I actually did this to, validate my hypothesis. And again, like GPT-4 is not ordering tests or writing prescriptions or anything, but you still have to have doctors making decisions about what's happening to people. But, so my mom got out of the weeds because I found her a concierge doctor. Like I sent her to specialists 300 miles away. Like I sort of hard intervened in what was going on with what she's doing. And like, I'm here to tell you that not everyone living in rural Central Virginia or rural anywhere else, like has a Kevin Scott to go intervene on their behalf. And like, that sucks. Like everybody should have someone or something who can like intervene and like help them solve their health problems. Like if I hadn't intervened, I'm not really sure whether my mom would have gotten out of this. Like she could have been locked into a spiral. She's she's old enough where like I think a lot of people would have just accepted, the state that she was in. And like we don't collectively have to accept that. Like we can choose to use these tools in ways to empower doctors who are overburdened, so that they can be less burdened themselves and provide a better quality or standard of care for lots of people. And like that's what I want from AI. Like I don't Like, I want this more than anything else. Like, I want every kid in the world to like have the same quality of education that my daughter has, like, which I wanted for her because I didn't have it for myself. And like, I want everyone to like have the same, quality of expert care that my mom eventually got, but without like needing some like weird intervention from some, bald tech guy, like who is like massively not representative of the population.
I think awesome. And the other thing is also that AI is, going to potentially amplify humanity even in jobs and work. And say a little bit about, because this is part of the easy, the kind of the cheap shot that Jon Stewart was taking on the Daily Show, which is like, oh, it's coming for our jobs. And he's like, well, look, so the loom was coming for the weavers' jobs too, in terms of it being, like you no longer hand weaving, you got to be weaving with a loom, you got to changing these things. And yes, the time frame is greatly accelerated, which is the reason we all have, intense concern about people. But this is a thing that's going to amplify people. The transition is going to be really, challenging and have some real effort in it. But there's a there on the other side that, can help, kind of rural, poorer communities, et cetera. And that was one of the reasons why you went and put all the energy into writing a book about that. So I think a little bit of commentary on that humanism too, I think is useful.
One of the books that I read when I was writing my book is from this Berkeley economist, Enrico Moretti, and like the book is called The New Geography of Jobs. And he was basically trying to get to an understanding of why we have this real disparity between urban innovation centers, where you have Silicon Valley, which has a disproportionate amount of the world's software companies and like all of the economics associated with that, or San Diego, which is like this incredible biosciences innovation center, and like a huge number of biotech companies disproportionately are in like San Diego, and you've got New York City and London that like are these huge finance centers that like disproportionately have a large amount of the world's like highly technical financial industries. And, like, I think the question he was asking is like whether like this is just the destiny of the world, that like you're going to have this economic haves and have-nots that are going to be defined by geography and, like in specifically between a urban and rural divide. And so one of the things that I've observed from my rural community that I still have a connection to is that people who are prospering there are folks who make the most innovative uses of technology. And so there are lots and lots of technologies and tools that you can pick up and use that are not geo-restricted. Like you can buy CNC machines and you can write programs on top of the Azure OpenAI API, whether you live in Gladys, Virginia or Santa Clara, California. Geography doesn't matter at all. And in a certain sense, like for the software, like the geography really doesn't matter. So like the more powerful the platform gets and the more accessible it becomes, like the more opportunity you're creating for people to use these tools to like get huge amounts of leverage. And so like this isn't an argument that says you're going to recreate Silicon Valley in Campbell County, Virginia. Because I think that would be very hard. Like that actually would require, the formation of a new set of network effects, and like it would just be difficult. And people have had a very hard time trying to like replicate Silicon Valley, which lots of people have been trying to do for a very long time. But like you don't need that in order to have people building great companies that do powerful things. So I wrote about this in my book. Like there's this company in Brookneal, Virginia, that does precision plastics machining, and they are located in a defunct textile mill. So like the whole area was tobacco farming, textile mills, and furniture manufacturing. And all of that stuff left because there's no tool that you can use in those industries at the moment that gives you a ton of leverage. And so then it just becomes labor market arbitrage, and like the jobs just sort of went where cheaper labor was. But like their thing, like they have a huge amount of technological leverage. And so there's like, dozens, not thousands, but dozens of high-paid jobs in this company because they have figured out how to have technological leverage from the tools that they use. And the more powerful their tools, the more leverage they have, the more economically successful they can be, and the more jobs they can create. And because they're skill jobs, like they have the same property that Moretti was describing. So like, you've got these high-paid individuals who are like doing this super valuable thing, and like they're using a whole range of technological tools. Like they use the internet to like market themselves, like they use the internet to talk to their customers. They use these highly automated machines to build things. Each one of those high-paid employees in that company like creates those additional jobs in the community, and there's nothing stopping other entrepreneurs from replicating that pattern. And so like the things that you need to make this happen are pretty basic. You want like technological tools that are as powerful as humanly possible. Like you want good internet, you want good schools and good education. Like you want people to learn pretty early like what it is to be an entrepreneur, to like give people confidence that they can go solve problems, and that they shouldn't be afraid of their tools. I do think it's a real economic possibility to have this revitalization. Like you can see the kernels of it in a bunch of places, and like and where you see the kernels, it's all about technology.
So in every possible episode, we do try to bring AI into the conversation as a participant. And so for this episode, we asked Copilot about what are the sort of plausible, bold decisions that Microsoft could make to get its Copilot technology into more businesses' hands by the end of 2026. So I'll quickly read the list, and I'm curious what stands out to you, what you'd add, or if you think it's terrible. So let us know. This was their suggestions. Introduce a scalable AI infrastructure to offer a range of AI services that businesses of all sizes can use. Launch an AI marketplace, so create a platform where developers can share and sell their AI applications. Provide AI education and certification programs. Offer AI consulting services. Or develop open source AI projects and encourage community-driven innovation by supporting and contributing to open source. So, Kevin, what do you think of that list?
Pretty good. Like, so in like maybe you just uncovered my secret desire for helping to get Copilot built. Like, I'm just looking for the day where the thing can do my job and I can go retire. Like, we're getting close. It's awesome.
I love it, Kevin. You're not needed anymore.
Can't even tell you how much I long for that day.
It's one of the things that actually I think people don't fully appreciate about some of the origins of intelligence, which is intelligence is trying to figure out how do we get to the point where we can be lazy, right? And I think that's actually, in fact, part of the orientation of this. Now, it's my belief, and I'm curious, Kevin, to share your reflection on this too, that we're actually going to have a much longer period than either the proponents or the critics think of human plus AI. Like, for example, will a human job be replaced? Most often with a human using AI. So you want the human using AI as kind of a way of doing it. That doesn't mean there won't be some jobs replaced that are, any job where you're trying to get the human to do essentially a robot's job, the robot will be better. But in a lot of places, the human plus AI, and I'm curious about your reflections on this as we look forward.
I don't find myself like loving many of the predictions that people are making, like about the future of work with AI, and it's mostly because like I enjoy work, and I think a lot of people get a lot of value out of doing things that are valuable to other people. And I think we lose sight of that all the time. Like, there's so many things about our labor markets and the economy that let us abstract what we're doing. And like, I have to tell my children this all the time. It's like, you have to go figure out how to make yourself valuable to other people, because you're consuming a ton of things that other people produce. And like on some level, like you have to do something valuable in return for like all of the thing. So it's like, yeah, money and, like all this abstraction sometimes confuses us about this very, very basic thing that like, we are a society of human beings. Like we all like have a way to make ourselves valuable, and we all consume the valuable things that people do in return. I don't think anything about AI changes anything at all about that fundamental dynamic. It does change what we're going to be doing inside of that dynamic. It may mean that we're doing a lot less of one thing and a lot more of another thing, but it's still going to be, how do you find those value exchanges between people? What I hope for myself, I wasn't even joking, Aria, I hope a ton of what I'm doing right now gets completely automated away by tools, because it's not like I'm walking through my daily life saying, man, I really enjoy all of this crap that I'm doing. I want to go figure out how to do new and interesting, different things than what I'm doing right now. And yeah, I think the thing that's important is like people just need to like have stability in what they're doing. It's one of the reasons why I think a lot of tech people talk about things like universal basic income, where, like it's all of this transition is happening. Like you don't want people to have to choose what they do, or, because they're fearful of some bad economic outcome, or like they have to be anxious about, something that is coming into existence because they think it might displace them. And so, look, I think the story of the human race is like we always find ways to be valuable to one another, no matter how sophisticated the tools are that we've developed. I think that will be true in the future. And then I think we have to think very carefully about, what you do to help people who are being displaced. But, Reid, you were spot on, I think. Like I've been watching these predictors of what automation and AI in particular are going to do to the workforce for at least a decade now, like very closely. And almost all the predictions have been wrong. Like wrong for like a bunch of complicated reasons. Some of the reasons are like actually the tools are not as good as you might hope that they are. And like they're good in the sense that they right now are good enough to help you automate away tasks. But like there's nothing that can, really replace whole humans right now. So like that's just a technical fact. And then there is the like, sort of, as the tools come in and make you more productive at tasks, and like you have an excess of cognition, or like hours in the day to go do stuff, like stuff fills the excess. I love, your line, Reid, that I've heard you say a bunch of times, which is, like if you're a company and you've got a productive sales force, and like you've got a tool that can come in that will help you sell more, like you want to sell more. Like you're not going to like say, oh, well now because I've got more productive salespeople, like I need fewer salespeople. No, it's like, no, great. Like now maybe I want even more salespeople.
Well, this is actually one of the things that people don't realize is in this kind of companies competing with companies, there's lots of places where they necessarily want to hire people. Like you say, well, the marketing job will change. Yeah, but I still need to do marketing to compete with other companies. And if all of us only have GPT-4, is like we go, oh, we get rid of our marketing department and we use GPT-4. It's like, well, you have an undifferentiated GPT-4 marketing across all of them. You actually need people to be figuring out how to use GPT-4 and, kind of, and how to do that as leverage. And that's part of the reason why I think this kind of person plus machine is a much longer and maybe very long period in our kind of job productivity that most people aren't focusing on, because it's not as like the robots are coming, oh yay, or the robots are coming, oh no. It's like the robots are coming and we're going to do a lot of interesting things.
And like we, there are going to be a bunch of things. That the tools will be able to do, and we'll choose not to use the tools for them. Like I've just recently gotten into ceramics, and it's kind of amazing how little the tools have improved over a very, very long period of time. Even though it would be quite easy, and like, but part of what I'm doing is like I'm sort of making a bunch of tools to like help me cheat at pottery. Which like all of the ceramics people that I'm trying to learn from look at me and they're like, "Wow, you're a weirdo. Like that's not how we do things." And like there's a bunch of examples of that all over the place. Like, again, people are like at the center of the story. Like we will choose how we want to go use our tools, and like we do things inefficiently all over the place just because we like doing them that way.
There's all this swirl around AGI. And to some degree, AGI is the AI we haven't made yet, which is part of the reason why it's like, well, we sail past the Turing test and, oh, well, that was one, and, chess playing and all the rest of the stuff. What do you think is the good listening and taking away from the kind of the way of thinking? Like, everyone keeps hearing about, well, we're targeting AGI, we're making AGI, what's going for AGI. What do you think the humanist stance on that is? How should we reframe that question, and how should we think about artificial general intelligence as something that we can help shape to a better human future?
Well, I don't know that I have the perfect answer there. I've said a lot that AGI is kind of a Rorschach test for people, and a lot of the times it's like, what are you most anxious about in the development of the technology? I don't even know what it means, honestly. Like in a literal sense, like if you had to sit down and write a technical definition of AGI, I think you would have a very hard time doing it. And like that's part of the struggle, is like we don't have a shared understanding of what it means. So the way that I have been thinking about it for a while, and I don't know that this is perfect, is I think that the world could benefit from an excess of cognition, the same way that the world benefits from an excess of the capacity to do mechanical work. Like if you could all of a sudden make scientific progress go faster, you could make the design of new things go faster, you could increase the amount of compassion in the world, you could like have infinitely patient or sources of infinite patience that could help us understand one another better, and that could provide options in an objective way to from which to choose to solve some gnarly problems that we have. Like I think all of that would be good. Like it's hard to say that you don't want any of those things. And so I think a humanist way of thinking about this is like, what do you want to encourage more of in the world? Like what could humans benefit from? And like how does this technology, or how can you steer this technology in directions where you get more of those things? And you have to be realistic about what the technology is capable of. And like I think also you have to be kind of aware of your biases, in the sense like I've been thinking a lot historically about two technological revolutions. So one is the steam engine, and like we know what that did and what the opposition to it was. You've got the Luddites throwing wooden shoes into the works of these machines to try to break them so that they didn't disrupt their livelihoods. And like we also know that when you got to equilibrium with that technology, that it just massively benefited from the world. And even today, if you look at the balance of economic power in the world, like it's mostly because certain countries were early to adopt industrial technologies than others. And so like in some cases, decisions that got made 200 years ago, like have lingering effects today. And then there's this other, technological revolution, the printing press, that had similar long-term impacts, but like it impacted a different set of people. So rather than factory workers who were worried about disruption, like the printing press disrupted basically knowledge workers. So, people whose job it was to write and to distribute thoughts and ideas via the written and spoken word. And like there were a lot of people super agitated about the invention of the printing press and the I don't want to call it the commoditization, but like the sudden ubiquity of thoughts and like who got to say what to whom. And, like that was a way more controversial revolution. Like we had like some very, very serious wars, that basically were precipitated by the printing press because it kind of changed, the power balance of the world. And so I think there are things to learn from both of those. So like, lesson number one is like things are going to be okay over time, and that technology really does massively benefit society. Like you wouldn't go take mechanical engines or like books away from society now. Like people, it's just like the idea is insane. Like you can't imagine how the world would work. And I think, someday that's where we're going to be with artificial intelligence. Like you'll be like, oh my God, like I just can't even imagine like how things would function without it. And so most of what we have to do now is to choose like what kind of wave of change we're going to have. Is it a printing press wave? Is it a steam engine wave? Or is it something entirely new? And hopefully it's something entirely new because like we can go look at history and we can look at what we want for ourselves and like we can decide on a better path.
Is there a movie, song, or book that fills you with optimism for the future?
I particularly like Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Memory, which I think is a beautiful science fiction book that I don't think Adrian was trying to write a book about LLMs and transformers and AI, but like a lot of the elements of that book are shockingly harmonized with what's going on in AI. It's a great book, and everybody should love Adrian Tchaikovsky. He's awesome.
I love it. So this next question can be personal or professional. Is there a question that you wish people would ask you more often?
So Reid asked this question at dinner of my 13-year-old, who's even more introverted than I am, and he was like, "Hey, Coco, is there a question you wish that someone had asked you tonight?" And her response was, "Do you want to be here?"
For all the introverts out there, get me out of this event.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Even Will.i.am, who was with us, laughed.
Like she didn't miss a beat. She knew exactly what question she wanted to be asked.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yep. So, where do you see progress or momentum outside of our industry that inspires you?
The progress that we're making in the biological sciences right now is like really awe-inspiring. And like some of it is because biologists are using technology and like even using AI in incredible new ways. But like even if you look at laboratory methods, like things are moving at an incredibly fast pace right now. And like everything from how quickly we got to effective vaccines in the pandemic to these new weight loss drugs that are on the market. I mean, it's just incredible how quickly we are making progress on tackling disease that has been like really difficult to tackle in the past. Like the rate of change is just high.
All right, Kevin, final rapid fire question. Can you leave us with a final thought on what you think is possible to achieve if everything breaks humanity's way in the next 15 years? And what's our first step to get there?
Well, I think in 15 years, we may have fusion or some other sustainable energy breakthrough, which would mean that we have cheap and abundant energy, which means that you can solve an enormous number of problems, like everything from, as you have computers that can do more things for us, like you can just dramatically increase the amount of net computation that is working in the service of humanity. But like you can also solve a whole bunch of like really nasty problems, like water shortages in a bunch of places. Like if energy was almost free, like making fresh water is no longer a serious problem. I think we will make real progress on climate change, both in engineering solutions to help environments that have become warmer, more livable, as well as addressing a bunch of the factors that are contributing to the warming environment in the first place. I'm very, very hopeful that we will have made serious progress on complex disease like Alzheimer's and cancer, and like have a whole host of new therapies that will reduce the net amount of suffering in the world. I am hopeful that we will have a new set of technologies that allow kids everywhere to have access to higher quality education and to allow elderly people wherever it is that they live to like live in dignity with independence longer. I don't know, like I'm just sort of like the way that I describe myself is short-term pessimist, long-term optimist. Like if I look over 15 years, I'm super, super hopeful. And the short-term pessimism is just being an engineer. Like you sort of walk into work every day and everything's broken. And you're like, oh my God, what are we doing? But if you're a successful short-term pessimist, like you have to have the long-term optimism, because otherwise you just give up. And that's the worst thing in the world. Just like, don't give up.
Possible is produced by Wonder Media Network. It's hosted by Aria Finger and me, Reid Hoffman. Our showrunner is Sean Young. Possible is produced by Katie Sanders, Edie Allard, Sarah Schleid, Adrian Bain, and Paloma Moreno Jimenez. Jenny Kaplan is our executive producer and editor.
Special thanks to Surya Yalamanchili, Saida Sapieva, Ian Alice, Greg Beato, Parth Patil, and Ben Rellis. And a big thanks to Ben Scotch, Jennifer Jansen, Adam Zukor, and Little Monster Media Company.